This may get a little long, but we'll see. I've told this story several times over the years, but not online. Figured this would be a fun place to do it. In 1991, I was 6 years old and my family, mom, dad, sister, had moved to a different part of town. Better schools, nicer areas, that kind of thing. It was certainly an upgrade from where we were moving from. The house stood out from the other houses in the neighborhood. It was the only two-story house in the neighborhood, and the foundation noticeably sat up higher than the surrounding houses. My dad had learned that when the neighborhood was being developed and the land was being leveled and flattened, they would end up with a big mound of excess dirt, so they basically just built a house on top of it. It was a tri-level house with a 2-car garage, family room, a half bath, and closet on the lowest level. After living there comfortably for 10 or so years, my parents decided to combine the 1/2 bath and closet into a full bathroom. To do this, we had to jackhammer through the concrete foundation to move plumbing for the new shower that was going in. Keep in mind that context is speculative, given that there's no way to know if doing so had anything to do with what started happening almost immediately after we remodeled that bathroom. It just always felt that way to me and my family. The middle portion of the house was the kitchen, dining room, and living space with 3 bedrooms and a bathroom at the top level. Within days of the remodel, late at night my dad's stereo system turns on in the living room while everyone is asleep. I was the first to wake up, so I went downstairs expecting to find my dad rocking out at like 2 a.m. for some reason, although he's definitely never done that before. Though he is quite the audiophile, so you never know. But as I'm getting down the stairs, not only am I realizing it's some random late-night radio playing, but there aren't even any lights on. I just remember turning on a lamp and going over to the stereo cabinet, turning off the receiver, and just standing there like, what the hell? I was the only one who woke up as far as I knew. I had a feeling my sister, 14 at this time, was pulling a prank, but when I accused her of doing it that next morning, she was not having it. Parents brushed it off considering they never heard anything either. Well, this would keep happening. I'd say probably 8 to 10 more times in the following couple of months. The same thing would happen every time, always in the middle of the night. Stereo would come on and the volume would slowly go up until someone ran downstairs and turned it off. There were times it's gotten way too loud before someone made it downstairs, and this particularly frustrated the hell out of my dad because this stereo system was his pride and joy, and he was afraid the speakers were going to get damaged. My parents, of course, thought either my sister or I were doing this, but before we had even fully convinced them it wasn't us, other things started happening. For example, I was standing in the upstairs shower washing my hair one time, and as I'm facing the back of the shower wall, I see a shadow sweep around the whole shower. Of course, I pull the curtain open, expecting to see my sister or someone messing with me, but no one was there, and door was locked. There were a lot of shadow incidents. From the living room, you can see upstairs to some degree, and we would often see out of the corner of our eyes would see something quickly crossing the hallway from one room to another, like you would just barely catch a flash of something when no one was up there. Touch lamps would come on by themselves often. My dad said on multiple occasions he'd be laying awake having trouble sleeping, and the touch lamp on the nightstand next to him would come on by itself. Most notably, my close friend and my dad described seeing the exact same person in the house. In fact, they both saw this person while doing the same thing, which was walking into the front door when no one else was home. Probably a year or so into these occurrences, my dad got home from work one day, opened the front door, and saw a young girl around my sister's age standing at the top of the stairs that would take you down into where the remodeled bathroom is. He said she looked about my sister's age and had similar blonde hair, wearing a light blue dress with a white collar. As soon as he saw her, she bolted down the stairs. He went over there, checked the whole downstairs, upstairs. No one was home. A friend of mine not long after that would do the exact thing. We got home from school. I threw him my keys to open the door because I was carrying stuff. He walked in the front door and saw the same thing my dad saw. Described the same hair, clothes, everything. I wish the story got juicier from here, but ultimately we just adapted to it. It was a little spooky at first, but once we realized it was just a young girl, we were so used to it anyway, it was almost comical. Things kept happening up until the point I moved out at 19, and the house was sold about a year later when my parents would divorce. One other interesting detail is that the guy who bought the house did so as an investment property that he planned to rent out. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that house being sold or going up for rent over the 20 years since. Did we release the ghost of a young girl after breaking through the foundation? Perhaps a grave was among the mound of dirt that the house was built on? Did something nefarious happen, or was it just an annoying glitch in the matrix? Regardless, it's always been fun to speculate. This happened about 5 years ago, and even now, the memories of that time still make me shiver. It's one of those experiences that completely changes how you look at the world, especially when you start to wonder who or what might be watching you without you even knowing. At the time, I was renting a small house in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't much, but it had character. The kind of character that makes a place feel like home. It had wooden floors, old but charming furniture, and a cozy kitchen that always smelled like coffee. The best part? It was affordable, and it was mine. I had my own space, and that meant everything to me. But there was one thing that made me uneasy about the house: the crawl space. It was located under the house, accessible through a small wooden hatch in the laundry room. The hatch was flush with the floor, and it was always locked from the outside. I never paid much attention to it. In my mind, it was just an old, dusty space with pipes and cobwebs. Nothing to be concerned about. After all, I had my own life to focus on, and there were no problems with the house. Until one evening, when everything changed. I had a stressful day at work, the kind of day that drags on forever, leaving you drained and ready to collapse into bed as soon as you get home. So when I stepped inside my house that evening, all I wanted was to take a shower, eat something simple, and go to bed. I walked into the laundry room and immediately noticed something strange. The light was on. Now, I was pretty sure I had turned it off that morning before leaving for work. It wasn't a big deal, though. Maybe I'd forgotten. I flicked the switch to turn it off again and didn't think much of it. After dinner, I went to bed, hoping to forget about the long day. But at around 2 a.m., I woke up to a sound. It was faint at first, almost like a soft tapping or thumping. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just the wind or the house settling. But then it came again, a rhythmic thumping, almost like something was tapping on the floor, coming from the laundry room. My heart started to race. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't normal. I lay there frozen, wondering whether I should get up and check or just stay in bed and pretend I didn't hear anything. But curiosity got the best of me. I grabbed my phone for light and, trying to be as quiet as possible, tiptoed to the laundry room. When I opened the door, everything was still. The room was empty. But then I saw it. The hatch to the crawl space was slightly open. My stomach dropped. I distinctly remembered the hatch being locked and sealed tight before I left for work. There was no way I could have opened it by accident. Panic surged through me, but I tried to stay calm. Maybe it was just an animal, I told myself. Maybe a mouse or a rat had gotten in somehow. I quickly closed the hatch, locking it back up, and put a heavy box of detergent on top of it for good measure. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I went back to bed, but I couldn't fall asleep. I kept thinking about that hatch, wondering if something or someone had been hiding in there. But I didn't hear any more noises that night, so I eventually drifted off to sleep. The next day, I decided to call my landlord. I explained the situation, asking if there were any pest issues I should be aware of. He seemed genuinely surprised and assured me that no one had reported any problems like that before. He promised to send someone over to check things out, but for now, I decided to take extra precautions. That night, I double-checked the hatch and even placed a chair on top of it. I didn't hear anything unusual, and after a while, I started to feel a bit silly for being so freaked out. Maybe I was just imagining things. But then came that night. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a soft creaking noise. My bedroom door was slowly opening. My heart stopped. My bedroom door didn't creak unless you pushed it slowly, and I was sure I had closed it before going to bed. I stayed as still as I could, barely breathing, trying to listen for any sounds. The creaking stopped, and then I heard soft footsteps. At first, they seemed distant, but then they grew louder. They were shuffling, slow, and deliberate. The footsteps stopped just outside my bedroom door. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel a presence. Someone was standing there, close by. I could hear their quiet breathing in the dark. Every second felt like an eternity. My phone was on the nightstand, but it was just out of reach. I don't know how I found the courage, but I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. I pointed it toward the door, ready to confront whoever was there. What I saw still haunts me to this day. There was a man. He was crouched on the floor, his face pale and gaunt. His eyes were wide, unblinking, staring straight at me. He looked just as startled as I was, like he hadn't expected to be caught. We just stared at each other for a moment, neither of us able to move. My blood ran cold. Before I could react, I screamed and bolted out of bed. I ran as fast as I could, bursting out of my room and down the stairs. I didn't even think to grab anything, just ran. I didn't stop until I was at my neighbor's door, banging on it with everything I had. They let me in, and we called the police immediately. When the officers arrived, they found the man still inside the house. He was hiding in the crawl space. They discovered a small mattress, some food wrappers, and a collection of random items he must have taken from my house. The lock on the hatch had been tampered with. It seemed like he had been living under the house for at least a few days, maybe longer. But the worst part came when the police showed me something they had found, a notebook. In it, there were detailed notes about me, my daily routine, when I left for work, when I came home, and even what I wore. There was also a list of plans, but the police wouldn't tell me what was on it. I didn't need to know. I could already feel the weight of the danger. I moved out the next week. I stayed with friends until I found a new place. I didn't even want to go back to collect my things. I just wanted to forget that house, that man, and everything that had happened. To this day, I still don't know how he got in or how long he had been watching me. The thought of him hiding just beneath my feet, listening to me go about my day, is enough to make my skin crawl. To the man in the crawl space, let's not meet. Ever. This happened over 10 years ago when I was 12 years old. I live in a small, quiet town in Oklahoma. Our neighborhood was the kind of place where you didn't worry much about safety. The houses were spread out, separated by patches of woods, and everyone seemed to know everyone, or at least recognize their cars. It felt safe, at least back then. It was a regular school day. My grandma had picked me up like she always did and dropped me off at home. That year was a milestone for me. I had just started staying home alone after school. It made me feel independent, even though it was only for a little while. Normally, I'd get dropped off at around 3 p.m., and my parents would be home by 4:30. But today was different. My dad wasn't going to be home until around 7, and my mom, a teacher, had parent-teacher conferences and wouldn't be home until 8 p.m. No big deal, though. It was early fall, and it wouldn't even be dark until about 8:30. As soon as I got home, I went straight upstairs to my room, which was pretty much my sanctuary. I turned on my Xbox 360 and started playing Minecraft with my friend Seth. We were deep into building something, probably a huge castle or some crazy survival base. We played for about 2 hours, laughing and chatting over our headsets, when I heard the sound of a car door shutting outside. It caught me off guard. No one was supposed to be here until much later. Curious, I walked over to my window. My room has these big windows that overlook the driveway, so I could see everything clearly. With my mic still on, I glanced outside, expecting to see my dad's car. Instead, there was a red truck. I froze for a second. Nobody I knew drove a red truck. The truck was parked sideways in the middle of our driveway, like the driver wasn't in a hurry or didn't care about how it looked. A man got out. He was wearing a hat, a big camo hoodie, and jeans. Now it was September in Oklahoma, warm enough that no one really needed a heavy hoodie. It struck me as odd. I told Seth, "There's a guy here, I don't know him." I kept watching as the man walked up to the front door. He knocked a couple of times, then stood there for a moment. I moved to another window for a better view. He started walking back down the path toward his truck. I told Seth, "Okay, I think he's leaving." But he wasn't leaving. Instead, he walked past his truck and toward the side door of our garage. That's when my stomach dropped. He tried the handle. I could see him pulling on it. I whispered into my mic, "Seth, this guy just tried to get into my house." My hands were shaking. Thankfully, the side door was locked. We didn't always remember to lock it, so the fact that it was locked that day felt like pure luck. The man didn't give up. He started heading toward the backyard. I panicked. I dropped my controller and ran downstairs as quietly as I could. I wanted to see what he was doing, but I didn't want him to see me. I hid behind the wall near the back door, just out of sight. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. I heard him try the back door. The doorknob rattled, and then there was a loud thud. It sounded like he dropped something heavy, maybe a brick. My fear shot through the roof. I thought about calling my parents or my grandma, but I didn't have a cell phone yet. The only phone in the house was in the kitchen, and to get to it, I'd have to cross the living room. The back windows would make me completely visible if he looked inside. I stayed frozen behind the wall. A few seconds passed, but it felt like hours. Finally, I peeked around the corner, and he was gone. I didn't know if he'd left the backyard or was hiding somewhere outside. My instincts told me to get back upstairs where I could see the driveway. When I got back to my room, I put my headset on and told Seth what was happening. My voice was shaky. "He just tried the back door," I said. Seth was just as freaked out. Then I heard it, the sound of a car door slamming shut. I ran to the window and saw the man sitting in his truck. He didn't leave right away. He just sat there for what felt like forever. His truck bed was nearly empty except for two things, a crowbar and a shovel. My stomach churned. Seth told me to grab my iPod and try to take a picture of the truck's license plate, but the way it was parked made it impossible to see. Finally, the man backed out of the driveway and slowly drove down the road. After a few minutes, I went downstairs to see what the loud thud had been. When I got to the back door, I noticed the doormat was moved and the large plant pots around the patio had been shifted. My heart sank. He'd been looking for a hidden key. And the worst part? We did have a hidden key out there, under a smaller plant on a ledge near the door. He hadn't found it, but the thought of how close he came made my skin crawl. I checked the front porch too, and all the pots there had been moved as well. When my dad got home, I told him everything. He called the police, and an officer came by to take a report. I described the man and his truck as best as I could. The officer told us it was good that all the doors were locked. The guy never came back, but the experience shook me to my core. For weeks, I couldn't relax at home alone. Every creak in the house sent my heart racing. We moved the hidden key to a much better spot, or maybe we just stopped hiding one altogether. That day changed how I saw my house. It wasn't just a safe little bubble anymore. Even now, over a decade later, I still think about what could have happened if the doors hadn't been locked, or if he'd found that key. It's a memory I'll never forget.